Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to be talking about the post that I saw from the guys over at Berger Motorsports. If you guys saw in their story, maybe a little over a week ago, they posted an M340i on their dyno with a simple question: how much horsepower do you think this car made? Now, like a lot of you, I just completely blew it off. I assumed it was another M340 that made 450 to 500 wheel horsepower. And while that's nothing to shake your head at, I mean, that's definitely good power for these cars. It's something that we've kind of come to expect. You know, it's great for marketing to share with people what's capable, but we've learned that that's something that's possible for a while now. But I was completely surprised when I saw them post the results that the car made over 640 wheel horsepower on a dyno jet. And just to bump that up, over 560 foot-pounds of torque. So of course that's really crazy to see. I think that's the most power I've seen on a car with a locked DME. In this case, it has no flash tune. It's just a JB4 controlling everything. So in this video, I wanted to share more details on the setup and what they did to make this possible, and also open up the discussion: is a flash tune really needed, or is a piggyback all you probably need for your specific goals? So we'll talk about that in this video, and hopefully you guys find it useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe, because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So first of all, let's do a recap on the build. So this is a 2023 M340i, so relatively new. You can see it's got the full LCI treatment, and this car is owned by CM Builds on Instagram. So if you guys are interested in following for more information, definitely go check out his social media. And they've listed all of the parts that are on the build in the description on Instagram. So let's go ahead and take a look. It has, of course, a BMS JB4 along with a port injection controller. So no flash, completely locked ECU. It is using their intake as well as their charge pipe with a blow-off valve. And it has the Gen 2 race intake manifold with 550cc injectors. So that's where the port injection comes into play. It also has their catch can kit, a fuel-it can ECA kit to control ethanol. It has an AGT hybrid turbo, and it's running on E60. They said they blended 91 with E85 to get to that E60 mix, and it's making about 30 PSI of boost. Now, if you guys are looking for more information, they do actually have screenshots of the logs and a little bit more info on their forums, JB4 Tech. That's kind of like the main forum that Berger Motorsports is active on, sharing R&D, different results and data for people that are using JB4 and supporting them with different tunes and options. So if you guys are interested in more information, I will have a link to that thread in the video description. But yeah, so basically a custom JB4 tuned big turbo setup. And this isn't brand new, but I think it's something we don't talk about a lot. And especially in this case, like I said, I think this is the most power that I've seen. No meth injection, you know, basically very similar to what we see a big turbo B58 run on a flash tune, just in this case, completely tuned with a JB4. So the way that it works is, in this case, they tuned everything in-house. They do offer custom tuning services, and of course it'll take a little bit longer as you can gather logs and send them data to dial things in. But in this case, they were basically able to get it all done in one shot using the dyno to load up the car. So as far as like the capability of JB4, obviously it can control boost. This is a piggyback that basically spoofs the car into thinking that it's running less boost than its target to help it increase boost to a set amount. So the BMS JB4 will tell the car that it's making 5 PSI so that the car will push more boost and target, you know, higher boost pressures. So that's how they were able to get the 30 PSI of boost. Also, they of course want to run more timing, and they are able to spoof IAT temperatures so that the car will advance timing to their target. So if the car thinks that it's running 100 degrees Fahrenheit, They can bump it up or down, and that will make the car run more or less boost depending on the scenario. So they're able to increase boost and increase timing just like a flash tune. They're also able to control flex fuel. So with that Fuel It ECA, they can see ethanol content and use that in the tune to scale fueling. They can also use it to control the different maps that you're running. So map 1, 2, and 3 can be set for different amounts of ethanol or different amounts of fuel, so that all of that can be controlled and dialed in specifically for your fueling setup. And along with that, the ECA kit includes a low pressure fuel sensor. So a lot of you guys know with like a Motive Reflex, for example, we highly recommend adding an aux fuel pressure sensor so that you can see what the low pressure fuel is doing. And in this case, since it appears they're using the stock low pressure fuel pump, it's very important to monitor that to make sure that they're not overwhelming the stock low pressure fuel pump. And if they were to go over and hit a limit where it's making fuel pressure drop, the map can revert to a safety map that'll drop boost and keep everything in check. And then, of course, it can control port injection. So there are multiple JB4 add-ons, and one of them is the PI controller, and that can control all 6 of the injectors that are inside of the intake manifold, and that will give them the additional headroom they need to make the extra power over the stock fuel system. So yeah, I think when you break it down like that, it actually is pretty simple. It is a piggyback, so it can read data coming from the different sensors that it's plugged into and send data to the DME based on what it wants the car to do. And that's no different with an auxiliary fueling setup or an upgraded turbo setup. You know, it's really just up to you to get it dialed in for whatever combination of parts you're putting on there. Now, this also sheds light on a couple things. One, of course, is the AGD turbo. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that is a hybrid turbo that I am not familiar with. Possibly that's a new B58 turbo that's coming to the market. If any of you have more information, feel free to share it in a comment down below. And the other big one that a lot of you noticed was this new intake manifold. So BMS already makes like an OEM Plus manifold for the Gen 1 that reuses your stock core, and now this is going to be their race intake manifold that uses a much bigger core, can flow a lot more coolant, and just has a lot more capacity. So this should increase flow, improve cooling, and overall just be a bigger upgrade compared to what they already offered. So definitely interested in seeing more data on that in the future, but you know, with this little post, they did shed light on a couple new things that should be coming to the market. So with all that out of the way, now the big question I think some of you were asking, why did he stick with a JB4? Or some of you on the other side of the fence were, does this mean flash tunes aren't even needed? Do I still need to send my DME out to be unlocked? With this kind of capability, you know, should I just stick with a JB4? And I think just like anything, it has pros and cons. One big one is obviously it's much cheaper and you don't have to wait. So you can basically buy a JB4, install it in your garage or in your parking lot, and you don't have to wait for the extended time to send your DME out, have your car down, have the risk of it getting lost in shipping or damaged. You know, some people have even had issues when they reinstall it, not connecting connectors properly, and that can damage things. So it is just kind of risky. A JB4 has a lot less risk, a lot lower cost, and is easier to get into. The other thing, of course, is the capability. You know, it's obviously there. They even said with race gas, they're sure this setup would be capable of over 700 wheel horsepower. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, this is definitely something that works. It can make power. I think the biggest drawback is when you don't modify the DME, you're going to have limits. A big one on the Gen 1 was our fuel limits, which a lot of us have forgotten by now, but we were limited to around 400 wheel horsepower on stock fueling because there was just this cap that the JB4 couldn't work past. And if you wanted to get beyond that, you had to have meth injection. So I think this is a similar situation here, although I'm assuming the cap on Gen 2 is higher, but you have to add port injection in this case to work past that limit. Even if you wanted to run, say, like a Dorch Stage 2 or upgraded injectors, a JB4 just doesn't have the capability to modify the DME settings needed to run different fuel pumps and injectors. Your only option really is auxiliary fueling like port injection or meth injection. So that's just a limitation to consider. Again, obviously the power capability is still there, but you're going to be limited on options to get there. Another thing people mention is you're not going to be able to get past the speed limiter in your software. And that kind of depends on your car. You know, if you optioned it correctly from your dealership, then it should have a higher limit of 155 miles an hour. But some cars were limited to 130, and that just kind of depends, you know, especially if you bought it used and as they get higher miles. My understanding is you can't even update that. You kind of had to make that decision within the first like 500 or 1,000 miles for BMW to be able to update the software. Otherwise, it's locked in until you get a flash tune that disables it. So JB4 can't work past that. If you have a car that has that 155 limit, great on you. But for those of you that are still limited to 130 miles an hour, you're going to still be limited even with an extra 300 horsepower. And then probably the last thing, and one of my main concerns, is the logging capability, which, even with boot mode and MHD and other flash tuning software, they have had to evolve their logging capability over time to expand it, add new channels, add more data, and add in things to help give you visibility to everything that's going on in your car. JB4 is just not going to be capable of doing that. It can still tell you a lot of the critical parameters, boost, fuel pressure, ignition timing, all of those things can be logged with software. And even like the auxiliary sensors that you're adding in with your JB4 can be monitored with the JB4 software. And of course, they have safeties in place for those settings. But some other things, you're not going to be able to monitor, like a DME tune, and that really just depends. I haven't seen, for example, like Vanos position. So if you guys are trying to add cams and stuff, you might not be able to monitor how the Vanos is reacting and tune that with a JB4. Basically, just the advanced logging parameters aren't available on JB4, and you'll probably know that because if you're building your car to a certain point, you're going to know that those are things that you want to monitor. So yeah, definitely the capability is there. I think for most people, this is able to hit a lot of your goals, but depending on what you're looking for or what you're limited by, this might not be, the best route for you, and your only option at that point is to send your DME out to be cloned or unlocked. So great news again from Berger Motorsports. A huge shout out to them for just showing that this is even possible. I think this is shedding light for a lot of you guys that don't want to send your DME out, that this is a viable option, something that can definitely send your car into the 10s or even 9-second range in the quarter mile. So yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts. I'm curious to see if this is something that now maybe you're considering a little more seriously, or if this is swaying you one way or the other. We can keep the conversation going, but I think that's going to be it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.